All right, so I pressurized this thing to 120 and well, we're back to about 80. So I don't know what it is. I've got to do some research to figure out why the system is not holding. And it literally drops down to just about 80 psi every single time. So there's my problem. Damn it. Well, you saw it, right? So welcome to Mike It Yourself. This is Review Wednesday, and we're going over the Monroe air shocks that I installed on the 2017 Ram 1500. My problem is, for whatever reason, it is not holding the pressure and it's not totally depleting. So that's the confusing part of this. So normally when you have an air leak in your lines, it's going to go down to zero, or you're not going to maintain any type of air. My problem that I'm experiencing right now with this is I'm going from 120 psi down to 80 psi, and then it holds at 80 psi. So it's almost like I'm pushing the shocks over the limit, right? And then it's self-regulating itself down to 80 because that's the max it can hold or something. I'm not sure. So this is kind of a unique thing. As you saw in the installation video, and I think I did a separate one for the installation of the air gauge, I added in the air gauge because I wanted to be able to monitor my air pressure within the cab and not have to go to the back and put an air gauge on the back side of the truck to see whether or not I'm keeping my air pressure. So since installing that, I've noticed this problem. Now at the same time, I did start increasing my PSI up to 120. So I originally started my PSI pressure on these shocks at about 50-60 PSI. And that's just because I needed to find a starting point. And what I found is at that level of pressure, the rear end just felt too springy, too bouncy. And so I increased it to about 80-90 psi, and it felt a lot better. But it still wasn't kind of the rigid feel that I was looking for. And so I determined I'm going to go to 120 psi. Now these shocks are rated to sit at 150 psi with a fully loaded vehicle. So I'm well within the specifications of the Monroe shocks. The problem is now when it does its drop, it's not like a gradual drop. So I'm not experiencing kind of your typical, air pressure leak where you fill it up to 120 and you see it 15 one day and 110 the next day, but rather it's going like 120, and it'll be 1 or 2, even 3 days max usually. It'll be fine, and then all of a sudden I'll come out the next day and it's at 80 psi, and then it doesn't drop any further than that. So I'm not really sure what would cause that. It's almost like it had a pressure regulator somewhere in the mix. So if you guys have ever used an air compressor, you could set your pressure regulator, and that's not going to let your air go above or whatever, right? Like there would be like a relief valve somewhere to ensure you don't exceed a certain pressure. So that's kind of how this is acting right now. So I've got to do a little bit of research to figure out what it is that I'm experiencing. I've tried the normal or more typical methods of soapy water. I've checked all my joints to make sure that they're not leaking, so I'm not seeing any bubbles, and it makes a lot of sense because, like I said, I'm not losing the pressure over time. It hits one day at random, and goes from that 120 down to 80, and then it holds. So maybe one of you guys have some experience with that. If you did, throw that in the comments below. I definitely would love to hear your feedback, or maybe some thoughts behind things. My initial thought was that perhaps I was leaking at the air gauge. I used plumber's tape to kind of wrap around that to ensure that on the threads I wasn't leaking any air, because I experienced some of that when I did the installation with the air ride on my Harley. And in this case, again, checking it with soapy water, no leaks. So the next kind of logical step that I have in mind is looking at the shocks themselves, where the tube goes in. So in those areas, they're a little bit different. They use some little rubber rings, and I'm wondering if possibly maybe one of those isn't able to withstand the amount of pressure. So when I get it that high, that's where that's the weak link, right? That's where it kind of fails on me. So a little bit of research needs to be done. I'm going to look at all of those. I think with the original kit from Monroe, it came with the big knobby style kind of T-fittings instead of the quick release T-fittings. So if you've done any research on it, there is another type of fittings, and that's actually the kind that I have on the Harley, where you kind of just push your line in and then you can pull it back a little bit, and that locks it in place. And if you ever wanted to remove it, you just push down on the collar and it slides right out. It's not the screw on style with the separate O-ring. It's just all one piece. So it's very possible that added a little bit more complexity kind of to my setup, and one of those rings is failing me, but only at a certain pressure level. So I think my first step will be to strip things down so I can access all of those fittings, crank this thing up to probably about 120, 130 PSI, and do a very, very, comprehensive watch over thing. So I hope that my experience has helped you out. Again, if you've had any experience with this yourself, shoot a comment to me below. Let me know, and that way, I'm hoping you can provide me a little bit of direction. I'm not going to call this a fail, because when it's holding its pressure, it works absolutely fine. So obviously it's something that, it's a part that's failing. It's something small. It's not a big deal. It's not a, I bought this and you should never use it, right? So I just need to make sure that I'm in a position where if I'm going to tow my trailer, or tow a trailer, I don't have a trailer, but if I get a trailer and I tow it, then I'm not going to lose pressure on the road, right? I need it to maintain, because that's why I bought it. That's part of the dependability that I'm looking for. I think the shocks are great. The ride feels amazing when the pressure is right. So if you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button. I hope you enjoyed my content. Give me a thumbs up. That helps out with the YouTube algorithm to help, get this out to more folks, to hopefully, let them know some of the challenges they may face with this type of upgrade or enhancement to their vehicle. And if you don't want to miss it on the next video, hit the notification bell. We're on our way to a 1,000 subscriber goal. So every one of your subscriptions helps, and I truly, truly do appreciate you becoming a member of our community, and a place where we all just kind of help each other, right? So until the next video, I hope to see you in the win.